Hey there. So you want to teach a little one English, and it can feel like a huge task, right? But what if I told you that you could make it fun and easy with something as simple as a story about taking a test? Today, we're going to break down exactly how to turn this everyday thing into a really great language lesson.
I think we've all been there. You show a kid a long list of new vocabulary words, and their eyes just glaze over. It feels like a chore. So how do we flip that? How do we make it an adventure instead? Well, the answer is actually a lot simpler than you might think. The secret? It's all about stories. Seriously. Stories are just so powerful because they give words a place to live. They give them context and meaning. Suddenly, you're not just learning a word. You're meeting characters you care about. So let's do it. Let's build a whole mini lesson right now, using just one short story. Okay, let's put this idea to the test. I want you to meet Wendy. We're going to follow her as she takes a math test. And as we go, you'll see how a whole bunch of really useful words just kind of pop up naturally. So, our story kicks off with this super simple positive line. Wendy is a good student. This is the perfect way to start with a child, right? It's easy to get, and it makes Wendy a character they can relate to right away. You could even pause right here and ask your kid, hey, what kind of student is Wendy? Get them talking from the very first sentence.
So, what's Wendy doing? She's trying to focus on her paper. And this is a perfect teaching moment. You can explain that to focus just means to look really carefully at one thing and think only about that one thing. You know, just like Wendy's doing to get the answer right.
And why is she focusing so hard? Well, because she needs to figure out a math problem. Now, this phrase is fantastic because it's not just about knowing something. It's about the process of thinking it through. You can make this super relatable by saying, hey, when you build with your blocks, you have to figure out where each piece should go.
And then, after all that focusing and figuring it out, she can solve the problem. Yes, solve is that awesome aha moment when you find the right answer. The story tells us it took her 5 minutes. And just like that, by following Wendy's brain, we've naturally learned 3 super important verbs: focus, figure out, and solve.
But hold on. The story isn't over just because Wendy solved the problem. Now we get to switch perspectives. We're going to see what happens from the teacher's point of view. Think of this as the journey of the test paper itself. It's got its own little story in 4 simple steps. First, Wendy hands it in. Then the teacher marks the mistakes, checks the answers, and finally awards the points. See? A whole other mini-story. Okay, let's look at that first part. Wendy hands in the paper. That just means she gives it to her teacher. Simple enough. Then, the teacher looks for any mistakes. And this is a great chance to explain that a mistake isn't a bad thing at all. It's just a wrong answer, and it's actually how we learn.
So how does a teacher show where a mistake is? The story points out 2 really common ways. Some mistakes get circled and others are crossed out. You know what would be fun? Grab a piece of paper and a crayon with your kid and just practice drawing circles and crossing things out. Makes it real.
Okay, but what about the problems Wendy got right? She gets a check mark. That awesome little tick that basically means, yes, you got it, well done. It's such a positive, happy symbol that any kid is going to recognize. And what does each one of those lovely check marks get her? Points. Our story is super specific. It says every correct answer is worth 5 points. This is such a simple, real-world way to introduce the idea of scoring, and it's all happening inside Wendy's story.
So, we just followed Wendy's test from the first question all the way to the final score. But the most important thing here is that we didn't just read a boring list of words, did we? No, we experienced them. So now, let's break down how you can use this exact same method yourself.
Okay, here are the big takeaways. First, always connect new words to a story. Second, use simple characters and situations, just like Wendy in her test. It makes it relatable. And as you tell the story, make sure to repeat the new words. And finally, keep asking little questions along the way to keep your child right there with you in the story.
You see, this whole method can turn learning words from something kind of boring into a real adventure. It makes English feel fun and totally doable. So I guess the only question left is, what story will you and your child jump into next?